for a meeting. Pursuant to the provision of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that a final hearing before this commission is appealable to the Chancery Court of Davidson County or the Circuit Court of Davidson County. This is a statutory writ of certiorari. You are advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decision of the Historic Zoning Commission. And also another script that clarifies our preservation permit. If you are approved for a preservation permit today and you are not the contractor, please know that it is your responsibility to make sure that the contractor has a copy of the preservation permit before beginning work. The preservation permit includes items that require final approval and inspection requirements. The final drawings are a part of the preservation permit. Following the preservation permit will save you time and money, as enforcement of violations can sometimes be a lengthy and expensive process. The preservation permit is not a building permit. No work can begin without the appropriate review and approval by the Metropolitan Department of Codes Administration. Also, a bit of house process is that if you are the applicant, or represent the applicant, such as an architect or contractor, please identify yourself and how you are connected to the project. And also when speaking, make sure that that red light, as I have here, is on so that we are recorded for public hearing. So thank you, everyone. Ms. Ziegler, do we have any changes to our... Oh, yes, first, adoption of our June 18, 2024 minutes. Let me look at the agenda. Commissioners, do you have any questions, or is there a motion to move approval?
Move to adopt.
Okay, sorry. Vice Chair Stewart.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Williams. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Okay, now we get to the adoption of the agenda.
We have two projects that will come off. 4400 Utah Avenue, they did not meet the notification requirements, and 1014 Bate Avenue turned out to be an incomplete application.
Okay, thank you. And with those changes, is there a motion to accept the agenda adopted and revised?
So moved.
Vice Chair has made a motion.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Cashin. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Are there any council members here present? Okay. You're welcome to come forward if you'd like to speak.
Hello, I'm Councilmember Tasha.
Make sure your little red button, far right, as IT has instructed us.
Sorry, it's my second time getting up there messing up.
Thank you.
So I'm Councilmember Tasha Ellis in District 29, but I'm here in support of the 201 to 205 Broadway project with Jack Bird. He is a well-known person in our area and helps with the community. So I just wanted to talk about the resolution that we were able to pass at Metro Council in supporting the parcel or that alleyway that he's going to give over to the Nashville Fire Department. And I just wanted to say that the project that he is actually working on, aside from that, it's going to bring 200 jobs, and that also includes 500 local artists and musicians. And then they have it estimated the sales tax revenue is at $5.5 million. And the franchise tax revenue, he has it at $463,000. And so those three numbers brought me here to ask you all to support his plans and what he's looking to do with the parcel there at 201, 205. Because as I'm sure all you are aware, we've had a lot of issues with our musicians and our arts department. So anything that we're able to do to help them get jobs and funding is needed. And then the sales tax revenue is desperately needed as well, as we're, just last night passed the ordinance for the transit plan to be on the ballot as well. So we need all the revenue that we can. And I know that Jack is a good faith partner, not only for the community benefits. He, gives over, 5,000 toys and things away for folks in my community out in District 29. So I can speak to his character and his good faith with wanting to, follow the guidelines that you all have in place. And so, just wanted to speak in his support and hope that you all will allow it to pass.
Thank you, council member. Any others that want to, council members, please?
This is going to be a fun one. Councilmember Jacob Coopin, District 19. I'm going to tell you three different things about three different things you have before you. And try not to mix them up. Well, first of all, I want to speak in favor and excitement for our historic overlay for the rock block. Very excited to bring historic preservation to our city. The rock block, as a music person myself, is very, very near and dear to my heart. And the historic marker inscription says that it's one of Nashville's oldest streets. Elliston Place was a popular commercial corridor by 1930. Elliston Place Soda Shop opened in 1939. In 1971, Owsley Manier and Brew Reynolds opened the listening room style music venue Exit In, named for its main rear entrance. In the early 1980s, the area became known as the Rock Block, with businesses like The End, TGI Fridays, Obie's Pizza, The Gold Rush, and Moscow's, shaping Elliston Place's legacy as Nashville's counterculture epicenter. So just really excited for y'all to hear this today and excited to bring that preservation. I know we oftentimes hear of developers taking away historic projects and entities, and excited to hear the opposite today. Switch gears. I think it's 205 Broadway, our friendly neighborhood parking lot that we're talking about developing. I want to share my support and appreciation that the applicant addressed. I think last time you had it before you, there were a number of concerns that came up. And so I'm appreciative that he spent the time and effort to address those concerns. I know that there's some conversation around the height, and appreciate y'all weighing in on that today. And want to share my support for his efforts and the work that he's put in. I know he's spent a lot of time and effort and energy, and appreciate Robin and her team working very tirelessly as well on that project. And then, switch gears again, to the 1300 block of Rosa Parks. I know y'all have that before you. Mr. John Root did come and meet with the neighborhood to discuss that project. I think they still have some questions. I've got questions myself. I think that on the one hand, I heard from the applicant that they were trying to get a ruling on the height today and then to come back with plans, but my understanding is y'all have to review the whole thing, so would hope that maybe can get clarified by the applicant if these are the plans that he intends to move forward with or not. Again, want to share my appreciation that he did come to the neighborhood and speak to them, but I do want to share that I think the neighborhood does still have some questions that they'd want answered before they feel comfortable weighing in, and of course, my predecessor had taken this tact, and I support the tact of kind of deferring to the neighborhood's assessment of the project. So welcome their feedback as we move through this process, and appreciate y'all as always in your hard work and service. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Coopin, who is also I'm under your constituency. Anyone else? I see another council member, but would you like to speak?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Webb. I am District 10's council person. I'm the one that sent everybody a copy of the resolution that we passed at the council, which was almost unanimous. And I just say, I think sometimes we have to think outside the black and white areas, and this is a gray area, but I think it will bring a lot of positive to Nashville. And everybody knows I have a fireman's son, so I'm going to fight for anything for the fire department. And I hope y'all take that in consideration and consider that everybody in the council would like for y'all to make this variance, and I hope you will weigh that very heavily. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Anyone else from our illustrious Metro Council? We always want to thank each of you as well, because you all also serve our community and our county, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
ready for the consent agenda. Did you have something to read at the beginning?
I think that would be you
Okay,
to read
I'm on it.
on the consent agenda.
Yes.
That would be, legal will do the other, but,
After, okay, sorry.
right, no worries.
All right, so now we're ready for the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the public or the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. If there is a case on the consent agenda that you are in opposition to, please raise your hand when the item is called. Cases pulled from the consent agenda will be heard at the end of the agenda. Again, please raise your hand if you are in opposition to any of the following cases. All right. First, we have the administrative permits issued for the prior month. There were 35. 1121 Calvin Avenue, new construction of an outbuilding. 1717 Greenwood Avenue, new construction of an addition. 1601 Shelby Avenue, new construction of an addition and partial demolition. 1615 Eastland Avenue, new construction of an addition with a setback determination. 101 Rosebank Avenue, new construction of an addition. 4587 Rachel's Lane, new construction of outbuildings. 1700 Primrose Avenue, new construction of an addition. 2508 Essex Place, new construction of an outbuilding. 3901 Valley Road, new construction of an addition. All right, so those are the items proposed to be voted on all at once. If there's anyone in opposition, I'm going to just read them over again briefly. Please raise your hand so that we can make sure they're removed from the consent agenda. So we have 1121 Calvin Avenue, 1717 Greenwood Avenue, 1601 Shelby Avenue, 1615 Eastland Avenue, 101 Rosebank Avenue, 4587 Rachel's Lane, 1700 Primrose Avenue, 2508 Essex Place, 3901 Valley Road. All right. So staff recommends approval of the items on the consent agenda with the applicable conditions, finding the applications to meet the design guidelines of their respective overlays.
Thank you, Melissa. Commissioners, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Okay, Commissioner Cashin has made the motion.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Mayhall. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Okay,
All right, first up is Elliston Place.
Robin, just 1 second. So I think Ann Mickelson has a script to read. Thank you.
This is just a reminder about the public hearing process for the Historic Zoning Commission. First, staff will present a summary of the project and a recommendation.
Can we get a mic?
Oh, is it not close enough? Sorry. Okay. There we go. Is that better? All right. It's a reminder about the hearing process for the Historic Zoning Commission. First, the staff will present a summary of the project and a recommendation. Then the applicant and the members of their team may present for up to 10 minutes, and they will reserve up to 2 minutes of that time for rebuttal. After the applicant presents, there's public comment. Each member of the public has up to 2 minutes to speak. And if you're the member of a group who notifies staff in advance, you may speak for up to 5 minutes. The commission may ask follow-up questions of any presenter or member of the public at the end of their presentation or comment, as well as during its own deliberations. Response times for these questions do not count against time allotments. Once public hearing is closed, applicants and members of the public cannot initiate exchanges during the deliberation period without an invitation from the commission to speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ann. All right,
All right, first up is Elliston Place, which you heard a little bit about. The Elliston Place Rock Block is important for its exceptional local significance in representing Music City's rock scene. The district is associated with the music industry that obviously has long been very important and vital part of Nashville's identity. It represents the city's contribution to all genres of music, but specifically to the rock and alternative music industry, from both performance venues to supporting industries such as food, fashion, and retail. And there's really no other district in Nashville that can fully embody this particular era. For that reason, it meets criteria 1 of section 17.36.120A by making a significant contribution to local history. And I did want to explain that although only a portion of the district is included in the proposed overlay, the design guidelines were written assuming that those additional properties might come in at a later date. So staff recommends recommendation for the overlay to council and approval of the draft design guidelines. And is the applicant here? He may be running late. That's unfortunate. He was going to tell you a little bit about the overall development project. But that's our recommendation that you see on the screen, to recommend approval to council and approval of the design guidelines.
Robin, question, if the applicant comes later, is it appropriate for us to ask if, since he would be coming, or the applicant?
And if you've already voted,
Then you
had your
would-
deliberations and voted, it would be somewhat beside the point.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose at the end of the meeting, you could invite him to just offer comments if you wish to.
Okay.
But I believe by that point, you
Just in
probably
case, to
voted.
give him courtesy. All right, okay, thank you. I think Councilmember Kuppen has already spoken, unless he wants to say something afterwards. He's shaking his head no. Okay. I do have a couple of questions, but I'm going to wait to hear from commissioners.
I just have to say, having started my career within a block of this area and having breakfast at the soda shop and bean rolls at Gold Rush and seeing it, coffee at Moscow's and New York Times, it's exciting to see this part of town sort of come back to life and have the promise of not only rebirth, but also restoration of the existing architecture and creation of structures that recreate what was there before. So, and keeping the exit in is an important part of all that.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'll go ahead and ask my question. So this is specific to the design guidelines as a general comments. Since this is a unique historic preservation overlay, is there any other comparisons to the other overlays, like, for instance, Broadway?
And it looks like there might be, but there actually isn't. Because the time period the buildings were built could be similar, a little bit later, but similar. But it's really that what happened there in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that makes it unique. And so there's a little more here that could be allowed based on those design guidelines that you might see in another district of the same era. Because, I mean, I'm sure all of you remember, was it Smack? Is that
Smack.
the store? They had a real glitter kind of sign. There's a lot of painting of brick here. There was a lot of covering of the original brick facades at different points. And then what's most unique that I'm sure you saw in the guidelines is that a very tall, multi-story rear addition could be possible, because that's already in the works. That's already a plan. The owner who owns that middle part of the block who's doing this, he's doing that. And so if those other two buildings on either side come in, it's only right that they should be able to develop in the same manner.
Also, reading page 30, and I know this height and scale, since we are brought projects that question this particular guideline, can you give us a little bit more info on how that's gauged in the design guidelines?
Right, so those guidelines were written based on the development that's been allowed already. And it wasn't something that happened without our input. We were involved in it. But of course, they didn't have to follow our advice, but they did. And so if those two buildings on either side come into the overlay, they'll be able to develop in the same manner, which is that multi-story addition in the back.
Okay. Another question is, I know the report also said that exit in is not included at this time. Is there a reason? Just
Exit in is already a historic overlay, so we didn't jump across the street to capture that. So it's well protected. But again, my hope is maybe someday we can get the buildings on either side in.
Okay, very good, because since they're notable in the staff recommendation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, any other comments or questions? If we could tell stories of the rock block, we should not do that today. Okay.
Chair, real quick.
Yeah.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to say it's encouraging, I think, to find. Sometimes it's challenging to create these overlays, and it's encouraging to find a developer that's willing to work so closely with the Historic Commission to get an overlay in place. And I hope that trend continues. So just kudos to the developer.
Well said. Okay, so the recommendation is for our commission to recommend to Metro Council. This is our typical practice. So if there's no other questions or discussions, is to make a motion.
Madam Chairman, with respect to the Elliston Place rock block, I move for approval per staff recommendation.
Okay, there is a motion by Vice Chair Stewart.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Cotton. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay. Seeing hopefully none opposed, this motion passes. So we're happy to recommend this to Metro Council. Thank you. Oh, and thank you, staff, for working with the applicant. And yeah, it's going to be a good one. Thank you.
The next one, the legal counsel for this project has said that they'd like to defer for a meeting. So 201, 205 will not be heard today.
Okay. So number 16, 201, 205 Broadway is being deferred. And that would be for the next meeting, correct?
That's what I understand, yes.
Okay, all right. Duly noted. Thank you. Number 17? Who's presenting that? Oh, legal, we don't have to vote on a deferral, do we?
My understanding is that's been initiated by the applicant, who's chosen to defer.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's chosen by the applicant. We do not vote on that. Okay, thank you for the clarity.
Sorry for the delay. It took me a little while to get to the right notes. Now it's going to take me a second to get to the right slides. Okay. This is an application for infill on a vacant lot at 1320 Rosa Parks in Germantown. The commission approved an infill project here in 2021, but that project was never constructed. This new project consists of 4 separate buildings, 2 that are fronting Roselle Parks and 2 at the rear of the lot along the alley. So in terms of setbacks, staff finds that the project meets the design guidelines. These 2 buildings, which face Roselle Parks, the guidelines allow for building heights of up to 4 stories or 45 feet along the street. These 2 buildings meet the design guidelines for height. The project also meets the design guidelines in terms of siding, orientation, facade articulation, proportion and rhythm of openings, entrances, roof form, sidewalks and walkways, and parking. And then here are the 2 interior facing elevations. On top are the backs of the buildings that face Roselle Parks. Excuse me just a second. And on the bottom are those that face the alley. The interior of the lot has vehicular access from alley to the garages. And then here are the front and side elevations of those rear units. And I just want to point out that the guidelines state that the height should taper down to 2 stories, which is 35 feet for a pitched roof and 30 for a flat roof, including the basement level, if the building continues into the back second half of the lot. The lower height is to transition from the height and massing appropriate on Roselle Parks and the historic interior of the neighborhood, which is much smaller in scale. This requirement was neighborhood driven a few years ago when we all worked on the revisions to the guidelines. And I wanted to note that the applicant has really placed an emphasis on the word taper to argue that the 3 stories that they are asking for meets the guidelines, but staff has applied the design guidelines section that says, if the building continues into the back second half of the lot. And these rear units are clearly in the back second half of the lot. So that's why we're recommending that those should not exceed more than 2 stories. So staff recommends approval of the project with the conditions as you see on your screen.
Those are our typical requirements. Okay.
Good afternoon. John Root with Root Architecture, 753 Alloway Street. Happy to be here today. I heard the Councilman Coupin earlier say that the community had some more questions for us, and he's right. And I have a theory on that. And it's because we don't know the answers ourselves. So it's ultimately number one there on the board that we're talking about today. We wanted to put this in front of you and take an old project that we've already gotten approved from you before, put it before you in this situation, and ask you this question. Our owner has a previously approved project, apartment building, and he is, while the economy is doing its thing, we're exploring other options. And he would really much like to prefer to maybe look at a possible townhome development on this project. And I have before you the guidelines in extra size here. So, but I think we identified the issue here, and according to the guidelines, townhomes really aren't allowed on this project site, right? And as ludicrous as that sounds, we all know that not to be true, right? There's not a category that says townhomes in the new construction. And so the only thing we can defer to is the interpretation of the guidelines. And the tricky little word taper, as we've been discussing it aggressively. The height should taper down to 2 stories. 30 feet for a flat roof. We show that on a paper here, we agree. There is no basement, so we don't have to talk about the basement. If the building, it continues into the back second half of the lot, and then there's a period. And so we have reduced the height of the back townhomes to 2 stories. And we feel like this meets the intent of the guidelines. So that there is the question for you. We feel like the whole project is tapering. The section before you today, we added some community input on it. And the only thing I added was the approved dadu across the alleyway. That's 20 feet, 3 inches. So I wanted to kind of maybe show that to everybody and say, I think this still meets the intent of the guidelines. It's all tapering. Sunlight is allowed to come to the alley. What we're trying to do here is produce a second, I know there's a lot of naming nomenclature, walkway, sidewalk. So we're trying to create a walkway that's along the alleyway to kind of create a more safe and friendly and residential friendly environment. Anyway, we've had the benefit to do a lot of projects in Germantown, and I feel like our office is very positive on this concept, and we feel like this meets the intent of the guidelines. Now the question is, for the neighbors and to me and everybody, we can talk about rezoning, we can talk about eliminating uses, more than happy to have that conversation. But what we're talking about today is a scale and massing questions for the guidelines. The guidelines are written, how do we interpret it? Because I have a client back there and we have millions of ideas that we could develop this site, but we don't understand this rule. And so we're looking to the board for help. And I'm here to ask any question, answer your question.
They don't review just height. They
Right.
review a project. And if this isn't the project you want, do you want to defer?
No, I think the existing project is close enough to what my client wants. And we just need to determine the fine details. And we're more than happy to work with staff after we determine this rule.
Okay, so I just want to make sure you know that if they approve it today,
Yeah.
and then they do approve additional height in the back, that doesn't mean that once you change it,
Completely understand all
that they're
that.
going to approve it a second time.
Completely understand all that, and we're more than happy to take that on. And we know we're gonna have to come back to the commission and work with staff more. So we just need your help with this simple guideline. Like we don't, the neighbors have an opinion, we have an opinion, it gets muddy when we talk about use and other characteristics. So we've tried to simplify it in a way that we can all discuss it. So I'm here to answer questions or anything else you may have.
Mr. Root,
Yes.
so on the recommendations, which one are you in question of?
Number one.
Okay.
The buildings in
Just
the
to be
rear half of the
clear.
lot shall be no more than 2 stories tall.
Okay.
What we are showing is a 3-story home, because essentially we're putting a garage use under a 2-story home, and it's pushing that back half of the home up. And because it's still tapering, we feel that it meets the intent of the guidelines.
Good. Thank you for the clarification. Anyone else on your team or the applicant? Okay, all right. Open public hearing. Councilmember Coopin?
As if you didn't get enough of me earlier. Again, I want to echo that I appreciate Mr. Root and his client's efforts to work with the neighborhood. I think y'all heard they're trying to get at understanding, which makes sense to me, of the taper definition. And I just kind of want to reiterate on behalf of the neighborhood. I think there was an individual who wanted to be here who couldn't. I think she is supportive of the 2-story at this time. Again, I'm supportive of additional height density, working with applicants to get there. I think that we could get there. I'd be supportive of trying to get to that 3-story mark, but hesitate to do so without the neighborhood fully bought into that. So I hate to be kind of wishy-washy on it, but I think that the neighborhood has the same question of what's the project going to be and what's it going to look like and what's it going to, how's the massing going to be, what's the material going to be and things like that. So that's kind of where we're at, but it sounds like regardless, this is kind of an interpretation of what the word taper means, and then they're going to come back to the neighborhood and community anyway, so a little bit of a different one for us, but kind of just on behalf of the residents, wanted to share that as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. We also just note that there was a public comment by one of the neighbors, which is in the SharePoint, so just to acknowledge that. Anyone else from public? Okay, we'll close public hearing. Commissioners?
I understand Mr. Root's, I don't want to call it confusion. It's just how do you decide? That's what we're here for, right? From the section, certainly I feel like the section meets the definition, at least as I understand it, of the word taper, but I think height and buildings in the back further muddies that water, and can it both taper and be 2 stories at the same time is really the question we're here to decide. So as master of the obvious, that's my opening salvo.
There is a height restriction, isn't there? Robin, can you clarify that for us, please?
The guidelines say that the height should taper down to 2 stories, including the basement level, if the building continues into the back second half of the lot. So whether it's tapered or cut or separated, the back half of the lot, as currently being proposed, is 3, and the guidelines call for 2.
Okay.
So to put a further finer point on that, the syntax of the guideline then would be the lot it's not 100 feet deep, but if it were 100 feet deep, then you said the second half would be the last 50 feet. And in the syntax of the guideline, that's where the 2-story interpretation is direct or clear, or where we need to bring clarity by our ruling.
That's my memory, and I know you worked with them too, that the neighborhood was wanting and asking for with this revision.
Yeah, oh gosh, asking my memory to go back that far is, we're lost. So, but I think seeing the guideline as written really is where we need to, what I would lean on.
And I think just in further for that comment is that the reason for those revisions is so that it would pay attention to the residential on the back side of the alley, which is my neighborhood, and I can see that they have, more than 2 stories on that 7th Avenue North side. So I think that was again, paying attention to the historic context of the street.
and I haven't been down that street in a minute, but my recollection from having lived over there is that generally 1 and 1.5 are there 2-story. I think there are maybe 1 or 2 stories on that side of that block of 7th. Or are there? I don't remember.
Yeah, there are, but the height is very similar to the 1 and 1/2 story.
Sure.
Historic context. While commissioners are
I have a question.
looking at that stuff, okay?
In the guidelines, I think I just read, it said specifically that it's 30 feet for a flat roof, 35 for a pitched on that rear. Is that correct? Okay,
Yes, that's correct.
okay. So being that the total building height there from the alley to that 3rd floor is 38 feet 4 with a flat roof, I mean, is that, am I reading that correctly?
Yes, that's our concern.
Okay.
With that said, I'm not watching for other commissioners, but just a general comment. It is good to see interest in that lot because it has been vacant for quite a while. So thank you to the applicant for bringing it back forth.
I guess I'll just throw it out there that I'm just leaning to support the staff recommendation in light of the conversations that were had with the neighborhood, in light of the fact it sounds like more conversations need to be had with the neighborhood and that they seem to line up with the guidelines. That's just where I'm at right now.
I mean, it's great that the applicant will have more conversation with the neighborhood. That does, we listen to that as a commission, and however, our purview is the guidelines. So with that said, even after this meeting and you have a continuing conversation with the neighborhood, it is still up to our commission to say if this is approved or not. So just to encourage our commissioners to be thoughtful of that.
I think I'll agree with Commissioner Cotton. I think it's a good question to ask. The way I read it was that if you had one long building from Rosa Parks extending into the back of the lot, that it should taper down to 2 stories. And I think if that was the case and it was tapering, I don't know, I think we should have some discretion on if they're following that. However, I think once you've got the whole unit being pretty firmly in the back half of the lot, I don't think that's in the tapering. I think the tapering is kind of meant to be from Rosa Parks down. And so I think I agree with staff that those that are so firmly in the back already, that start in the back, that end in the back, that aren't really close. I think that's the intent of, and the words. I mean, I wasn't here when they did those meetings, and those are so important in setting the rules, but after the rules have been set, you know, we need to go by them. We can't be like, well, 3 years ago, we talked about this, and, I mean, that's, if we got that wrong and we need to go back and amend it, that's important. But I think it's good that you're asking this question, and I would agree with staff that those in the back should probably be 2.
Thank you, Commissioner. If it's clear enough, would you like to make a motion?
In regards to 1320 Roselle Parks, I move that we approve the project with staff, with all conditions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. There's a motion. There's a second by Commissioner Cashin. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you, applicant. Continue to work. Thank you.
Chair Bell, I'm going to interrupt for a minute. I realized, as my error, and I will own it, I thought I knew off the top of my head what the procedure was for deferrals for your commission, but you actually do need to have a motion to approve that request for a deferral. So what you can do is you can have a motion to suspend the rules,
Okay,
approve that, and then have a motion to accept the request,
Okay.
approve the request for a deferral, just to clean
Okay.
that up.
We
for,
will-
for item 16.
yes, for item 16, we will suspend,
Madam
You need a
Chair,
motion to suspend the rules.
motion to suspend.
Madam Chair, as a procedural item, my motion to suspend the rules.
Okay,
Second.
second. So we have Commissioner Mosley made the motion, Commissioner Cotton made the second. All in favor? Okay, seeing none opposed, that motion passes. For the suspending of the rules, but deferral, we need to vote that and that too.
Correct, so an
All right,
independent motion.
let's make the motion that the applicant requested deferral for the next 30 days.
And that you're
For the
approving
next
that
meeting.
request.
And that we as commissioner are approving that request to defer.
Madam Chairman, with respect to 201 through 205 Broadway, I move that we accept the applicant's request to defer.
Okay, Vice Stewart has made the motion. Second by Commissioner Cotton. All in favor? Okay, seeing none opposed, that motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Thank you, legal.
Close suspension of rules.
Yes. You can-
We will now close suspension of rules.
So moved.
Thank you. Oh, legal, do we have to make a motion on the closure of the suspension of the rules?
You can go ahead and do that.
Okay,
Just
so I
close
think
them there.
Commissioner Mosley has made the motion, and Commissioner Mayhall has seconded the motion. All in favor of the motion? Okay. Seeing none opposed, that motion passes. Thank you. We are on procedure.
All right. The next
there you go.
item is 1505 Cedar Lane. 1505 Cedar Lane is a circa 1930 brick Tudor bungalow that contributes to the historic character of the Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. At the June meeting, the commission approved an addition to the historic house with the condition that the footprint of the addition be no larger than the footprint of the historic house. This new application is a new design. While the applicant has reduced the footprint of the previous version of the addition that was reviewed, the footprint proposed with this application is still larger than the footprint of the historic house. Here's the site plan. The addition meets all base zoning setbacks and is no wider than the historic house. And here's the first floor plan. In order to, for the addition to be an appropriate scale, additions should not more than double the footprint of the historic house. In measuring footprints, the commission includes all covered parts of the house and the addition, whether or not they are conditioned space. So this would include porches on both the historic house and the addition. That both of those would be included in the footprint calculations. In this case, the addition's footprint is larger than the footprint of the historic house by approximately 166 square feet. The existing house has a footprint of about 1,484 square feet, while the addition is approximately 1,650 square feet. So staff finds that the proposed footprint is out of scale and does not meet the design guidelines for addition since it exceeds that of the historic house. Here are the side elevations. Overall, staff finds that the foundation, wall, and eave heights, the roof form and fenestration pattern meet the design guidelines. Staff finds that the long dormer and connector on the side elevations can be appropriate since both are inset 4 feet from the primary side walls of the historic house. And in conclusion, staff recommends approval with the conditions set forth that you see here, including condition number 3 regarding the addition's footprint being no larger than the footprint of the historic house.
Thank you, Melissa. Applicant?
Good afternoon. I'm Lee Ross Dinwiddie, P.O. Box 743, Franklin, Kentucky, 42135. So we initially had a design that worked really well. Unfortunately, it was like 400 square feet too big. So it left the existing house mostly as is and then added on an addition. Very respective of the existing house, left most walls in place. To reduce the square footage, the clients agreed to go into the existing house and take out walls and install beams, take out floor systems. And we reduced that square footage to the point where our conditioned square footage is no more than double the existing house. Our back porch is what's putting us over. So we feel while we are understand that we're not in compliance with that rule, we follow every other rule. We think that the addition we designed is the best solution for the historic context. We think a historic home needs a back porch that is covered, that not only protects the doors, but provides shade. We think that not being wider than the house is important, although we could have tried to go wider. Unfortunately, we're on a large lot with a smaller home. So we're kind of at the mercy of how the house was placed originally. And our roof lines are within the historic context. So we keep the same eave height. And on a Tudor, we have a deep overhang, so those eaves just keep on coming down. And so, which is all fine and good if your house is 100 years old and you can have a family with 1 bathroom, but nowadays we're trying to squeeze a lot of things into that roof line that has to start at such a low point. So we were also able to meet the dormer requirements, which is not often easy with a Tudor. My favorite style, but it's very challenging. But the overall design we think is the best solution for the neighborhood. We don't think that anyone would ever see that this addition is 167 square feet too large, with that over just being a covered porch. And then more to the point, the sloping lot creates that porch, a foundation wall, basically. And if it were a flat lot, that could basically be a patio with no roof and therefore not footprint. So the difference in footprint and not footprint is whether you have to have a foundation wall. In this case, the lot requires one, and therefore our footprint has to be over. But that's our thought, is that the design as a whole is the best historic context to fit for the neighborhood.
Okay. Maybe we might have some questions for
sure,
you in a
of course.
minute, but thank you for the
you.
moment.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyone else on your team or applicant want to speak? Just to be sure? Okay. All right, I will open public hearing. Close public hearing. Okay. Give us a moment.
Sure.
Okay, commissioners?
Well, to me, it seems like the guidelines are pretty set, and we have, this has come before us several times, and we've never approved a footprint larger than the original house. And so, you know, I'm leaning towards staff recommendations.
I agree. I mean, I worry about precedent in this case. And I think that's just, you know, like you say, we've always done this. So I can't think of a compelling reason to change.
Robin, can I ask, as a non-architect on the commission, And as a point of clarification, the porch is included in the covered porch in the back is included in the square footage, and that's
That's right.
why we're kind of having this discussion.
So we kind of looked at it like for like. So if the front porch is included in the original footprint, then the rear porch should be included in the addition calculations.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. This is not in, this question is not in contradiction to the recommendation, but in terms of interpretation of footprint and appropriate scale, we all have to measure somehow. And do the guidelines indeed state? I think it's been mentioned by a couple of commissioners. I just wanted to be correct for the record that do the guidelines state that an addition can't be larger than the home? Or that really is, I think, a very reasonable staff interpretation, but I certainly wanted to be factual. And
That's more something that's evolved over time, because these Belmont Hillsborough guidelines are still the old ones.
Yep.
And so they really don't say much of anything. So we are going off of how you've interpreted them in the last few years.
again, not a disagreement with the recommendation or anything that's been said. We're here to interpret what's appropriate, but certainly if, for any case, if someone were to take this beyond our body, that we certainly want to be in a defensible position. So that's the only reason why I bring that up.
So I believe that the addition can be larger than the home.
We've
sorry.
closed public hearing, so until a commissioner
I'm sorry.
asks you a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Sure.
You know, I think it's a well-designed addition. I think there's room in there for reduction of 3.5 feet in length, which would bring it into compliance without destroying the design. I haven't seen anything in reviewing these and from the presentation of the applicant that would show a hardship that would give us any justification for changing from what our precedent has been. We've been very consistent over the years of trying to keep these modest additions, and you know, they suffer a little bit from the home being smaller than some of the others that we have, but I think that has been our precedent and what we've done consistently over time. So with respect to 1505 Cedar Lane, I move for approval with all staff conditions.
Vice Chair Stewart's made a motion. Second by Commissioner Williams. Okay. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Thank you.
The next case is 1402 Ordway Place. The applicant proposes complete replacement of the roof framing system on the house and window alterations in the front dormer on the west side of the house. The house at 1402 Ordway Place is a circa 1925 side gable bungalow-style house that contributes to the historic character of the Laughlin Springs East End Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. Claiming that the existing roof framing on the house is inadequate, the applicant proposes complete replacement of the roof framing. However, the design guidelines call for character-defining features such as a roof not to be removed or destroyed. An engineering report from Anthony Locke with Engineered Solutions has been provided to explain the issues with the existing roof framing system. The applicant has also provided drawings to show the proposed reconstructed roof. In his report, Anthony Locke states that the existing roof framing members are damaged due to a past fire. The report did not provide photographs, measurements of deformations or defects, the testing methodology used for assessment, or the estimated temperature of the fire, all of which could be helpful to determine the severity of the damage. Mr. Locke describes charred and alligator damaged wood from the fire and recommends complete replacement of the roof framing system. Staff recently visited the site and observed the concerns. While evidence of fire damage does exist, staff finds not enough evidence has been provided to warrant not meeting the design guidelines by completely replacing the roof. The roof structure has maintained its integrity for what seems to be a significant period of time since the fire, so it is unclear to staff why complete replacement is now necessary. While some charring throughout was evident to staff, charring alone is not an indicator of structural damage. Staff examined multiple charred members and found the char depth to be shallow. While the engineer's report outlines general concerns and arrives at the conclusion that replacement is necessary, it does not explain the methodology of testing and analysis that led to the conclusion. Staff finds that not enough evidence has been provided to support the claim that complete roof demolition is necessary. The applicant also proposes an alteration to the window opening size for the window in the front-facing dormer. That alteration can be seen by the red arrow there on that slide. The staff finds that the existing window configuration in the front-facing dormer is not the historic condition, and therefore staff finds that any alteration should match the original configuration as seen in the bottom historic image on this slide. The applicant also proposes to shorten 2 existing windows beyond the midpoint on the west side elevation, indicated there by the red arrows. Staff finds this alteration meets the design guidelines because the window openings are not being fully removed and the openings are located on a minimally visible side elevation beyond the midpoint. Staff recommends denial of the proposed roof demolition and reconstruction, finding that the project does not meet the design guidelines for demolition. And staff recommends approval of the proposed west elevation window opening alterations and approval of alterations to the window opening in the front-facing dormer with the following conditions on the screen. Number 1 is that the window configuration in the front-facing dormer is returned to its original configuration, and 2, that the MHCC approve the final material selections for windows prior to purchase and installation. So with those 2 guidelines, staff finds that the window alterations meet the design guidelines. I'm happy to take questions. I know the applicant is here as well. Scott's also up here with me because he also helped inspect the roof. So if you have questions for us, happy to answer those.
I do have a question, and it's not, again, I think the staff's recommendations and analysis are spot on, and I'm in agreement with item 1 in terms of the front-facing dormer, but I'm going to wonder aloud here, and this is for the applicant to verify.
Sure.
Oftentimes, if that's exiting a bedroom and somebody might just make that arbitrary decision, I want more light and this bigger window is cheaper or more readily available or any number of reasons. But I do know in egress for an upper story or a window egress for a bedroom, there might be a sill height. The applicant and the applicant's design team need to make sure that they run those traps so that they don't get somebody outside of this saying that they need to do something, and then we've approved what needs to be done, and then suddenly the opening's not big enough to crawl out of in the event of an emergency or whatever else. I know that's way down in the weeds a bit, but I wanted, that is on the applicant to make sure they figure that out and run those traps, that if they need that additional bit of egress, that they would propose something for the staff's approval before ordering it and installing it that would meet that requirement.
Yes, and in this case, that is a good question for the applicant. I know they are proposing to actually shorten that window rather than increase the height. So,
which I think, in terms of keeping water out and all kinds of other details, makes good both construction and logical sense. But there may be other factors at work here. I could be totally missing the boat on that, but there may be other factors at work here.
Question. During your inspection, in terms of referring to the fire that happened in the past, was it all of the roof surface, the framing surface, or was it just in specific areas?
it seemed to be most of the framing had been, I'll go back to some of these photos. Some of the roof decking had already been replaced. You can see some of that in these images. I think that was replaced sometime after the fire. So a lot of the roof decking is new. Still some has some charring from the fire. I believe most of the joists, though, had some level of impact from the fire.
Yeah, I believe there was much new decking, and there were some new rafter members, maybe a quarter to a third of the rafters, what would be to the right of this photo, that were replaced. Yes, that were replaced, that were new. And then that decking you can see there has definitely been replaced. That's on the back of the house, I do believe.
It looks, just from this photo, it looks like there's a, whether it be structural or not, or some other addition, there's a sister sort of angle joist there as well.
Okay. Applicant? Oh, did you have, I'm sorry, Matt.
Would you pass this if it was a new construction? With charring and whatnot?
Honestly, I don't know that would be an inspection item for the building inspector. I would personally, I would, yes.
Okay.
I examined it.
It'd pass a frame
I
inspection.
probed it. It seemed strong, yes.
Okay. All right, thanks.
However, in comment to that, having replaced a roof recently, today's codes and engineering standards are much greater than they were before. So things that may have been 2x8s will wind up being a 12 or 14-inch LVL. And so I think the existing structure, if it's, maintained and held up and been inspected, then I think, we have lots of those around here, and we're not replacing all the roofs, just because they're older. But I understand that. Yeah, sure.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Downing, 1016 Carolyn Circle, Hendersonville, Tennessee. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Kramer Projects, the general contractor on this proposed project. To make a few statements to, not to correct, but to inform you guys. On page 9 and 10 of our submittal, there are other photos. There are no corrected joists or rafter members besides one sistered board. Those other photos in the report show that. There is a small amount of decking that has been replaced, but it is not up to today's standards of what we would put on a home. It is old school shiplap stacking. Today we use a zipboard system or a significant sheathing that holds the structure together better, as well as the undersized rafters for today's standards and codes. There's also no ridge beam as well. So things of that nature, when we get into the framing inspection process, we would have a great number of issues with moving forward. Today, I think is a pretty easy conversation to have with y'all. I think we're in agreement on a lot of things. I think we can all agree there's damage to the roof structure, and that has been there for quite some time. I think pardon me, I'm nervous. I really don't speak in front of people. I build, I don't talk. So, although the roof is not collapsed yet, prior to the fire, and what we assume is 1977, that does not mean that the structure right now is not compromised. And the same conversation I have is electrical wiring in homes of these age would be cloth wiring. We don't leave that in place just because it's functioning. It's a fire hazard. We update and replace and make it safe. We have no intention of changing the look or overall feel of the structure. We want to keep it historical. We just want to give our clients a safe home that they can live in and prosper in. At the end of the day, this decision in front of you is really one of, would you feel comfortable in a home that this is above your heads? Our engineer has 41 years of experience. He stated that driving a nail and sistering it on and adding another structure basically on top of the existing one is a danger and would be compromised. Not in your report, and something that doesn't, come to your thing, is the interior structure of this home has many structural problems that we need to shore up and add into. Now, because it doesn't concern the outer look, this doesn't come to your purview. But we do need to fix those. And a concern of ours is adding a second roof structure onto the existing one puts an extreme amount of weight onto a structure that's already compromised and puts our work and the work of everyone in the future at more of a risk and hard change to fix later on. This solution that they have laid forward is a temporary fix. If you want this home to last and be historical and be there in the future, let us do it the right way. We'll meet every guideline you put forth. We'll work with you every day if we have to. We'll take detailed measurements. We'll match pitch. anything you guys require. But my main concern is always going to be that my clients who, at this point, are willing and able to take on this financial responsibility. Someone in the future may not be able to, and with the deterioration of this, now is the time to act and time to fix. I took some of your guidelines and notes and looked up definitions. In your glossary, alteration, repair, reconstruction, any part of the existing building. We believe this is not to make a full alteration, but to alter it to today's standards, but keep it where it needs to be. Your Secretary of Interior standards, subsection 6, where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of distinctive features, the new feature must match the old design, texture, color, wherever possible. We fully intend to do that. And lastly, principle, the historical character defining features should not be altered, removed, or destroyed. But in guidelines B of demolition, replacement of those may be necessary in extreme cases. We feel this is an extreme case. I'll say finally, whatever this ruling today is, we will meet your guidelines, but we would ask that if you find that our option to take this down and rebuild it correctly is not one, we would like a full list of available ways that we can determine if we need to replace something and not be penalized for it. If we nail into a board that is too far gone that we can't structurally be safe about doing, we would like to replace it. But how do we make that determination on the spot and meet your ruling? Would that be having to have someone out there every time we find a board that doesn't meet standards? Thank you very much.
Stick around. I might have heard you say, and this is not in this particular project, but is there a plan to do a second floor? Add a floor to this house?
We're not adding a floor, we're changing the internal layout.
Okay. I thought I might have heard you say if you added a second story that.
No, I'm sorry, again, I'm nervous.
No, don't be.
We're changing the layout of the floor, but as it stands, whether or not we change the layout at all, the roof itself is not being correctly shored and loaded, and carried all the way down to the foundation. So with our new changes, we'd be able to correct that basically at the same time as fixing the roof problems.
Which takes me to the next thing. If you do decide to do something, you will need to come back and have a full plan of anything that's changing.
Of course, and we've actually already pre-submitted plans for all those and siding alterations that you guys have already approved.
Okay, very good. Just want to be real clear.
Of course.
Okay, any questions to the applicant? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
No need to be nervous. We're only human.
No, I'm very good at building. So it's hard.
It's all right. Thank you. Open public hearing. A closed public hearing.
I'll say for being nervous, certainly the applicant made some valid points, and I think just in terms of boots and suspenders, at least worth our further deliberation on this one. I think the staff's analysis, we rely on the information presented, or I say we rely through them on the information gathered, presented, and the reports made, and I think they've made a determination. But the applicant made brought some good questions up, and I think, deserves our sort of full deliberation here. So as nervous as you were, well done. Better than many.
And I have a question, I think, as the commissioner with the second shortest tenure here, I don't think I've sat through a discussion about a voluntary roof replacement yet. Yeah. I don't think this has come before us, not since I've been on the commission at least. Yeah, unless it was being modified, So for my own, I've read the guidelines, but is this hinging on, I guess this is a question for staff, Joseph, Robin, whomever, the fact that, you're interpreting the guidelines to say the only way this can be done is if the roof system has deteriorated? Is that kind of what we're working off of? I'm just asking for clarity and for precedent and for my own understanding.
I mean, I think deterioration could mean a lot of different things, huge spectrum. Where we're coming from on this one was not that necessarily are we saying never, ever, is this going to be approved? Just that we didn't feel like we had enough information to prove that it needed to come down. You may feel completely different. You've got architects up there. You've got people with more experience than we do. You may feel completely differently. We just didn't feel like we had the information.
Okay, thank you.
So as I look at this, review the structural report, hear the applicant's arguments, you know, I had a house that had 2x4 roof rafters built in 1940, and it did fine and all that. But by the same token, like I said, I just replaced the roof, and the upsize was significant. I think that given that we have a structural report here, and given that the applicant has warranted that they will not change the exterior appearance of this house, and given that the materials that they're looking at replacing are not visible from either inside or the outside of the house, I don't see that there's a downside to allowing this owner to have the peace of mind to go ahead and do that. In some ways, it's a little bit like asbestos. You know, if somebody has asbestos tile, you can say you can just cover it up and you're going to be safe and fine. You know, it's part of the best practices, but some people would rather have them replaced rather than covered up. And so I think that with this, the other factor that I think about in this is that, you know, today, you know, it's probably fine, it'll probably be fine, but when you're doing construction on a house and you're taking out walls and changing, you know, floor configurations and that kind of thing, it puts new stresses on structures that could wind up bringing up some problems that aren't apparent at this point in time. So am I concerned with the current structure? No, but I think that I don't see damage in the owner replacing their roof as long as drawings are submitted and all the procedures for historic review happen along that before the work is done. So.
With this is I guess a warning to the applicant. Given some cases very recently that we've seen and new construction techniques that maybe aren't bird's mouths that you cut in joists and depths and absolute heights of roofs, I think these guidelines are written like, hey, don't screw this up. And oftentimes in the field, I also know, or at least I think I know, that, you know, new methodologies to frame something in that's unseen, depths are different. Bearing heights change. Well, I thought it would be easier. Oh, we raised the framing between the first and second floor is deeper, and the owner did not want a lower ceiling height, and so the whole thing shifts up, and all of a sudden all the details change. So, I appreciate that the applicant, I think, recognized and certainly committed, if it were allowed, that they'll pay attention to those details. I'll step off the soapbox now, but I would like to see if we could back up and see some pictures of the outside, because I think in boxing in eaves, that there's a lot here that if it's not carefully paid attention to, it's going to require a lot more inspection by the staff to make sure that these things are documented and that the applicant it behooves the applicant and the owner of the house to be exceedingly careful to not have to tear something off and redo it. And we've seen many of those cases, and it makes us look like jerks, but I mean, it's our job, and we need to do that, and we have to do that. So I think I'll get off the soapbox, but this roof is not, the roof and the construction techniques and the way that the eaves are boxed in is less detailed than others that I have seen, but certainly still those things need to be taken, detailed and photographed and documented if we decide that replacement to tear off and reconstruction is something that would be permitted in this case.
And if the conversation does move in that direction, I have some conditions that may help with some of that I can suggest to consider. reconstruction.
That'd be good. Do you have them there with you?
Yeah. So one, that the historic chimney be retained, that the existing dormers be reconstructed as is to the same dimensions. The dimensions, form, and pitch of the reconstructed roof match those of the existing roof. A partial demo and shoring plan be reviewed and approved prior to permitting, and partial demolition be accomplished manually and not begin until partial demo and shoring has been approved and the building has been shored. And of course, you can add others to that as well.
And retaining historical, like the fireplace chimney.
Yes,
That would
maintaining
be-
the chimney.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think we've seen a case where they removed the chimney and it should have stayed there. So just again, very clear for the applicant to see those fine details.
I think the other thing that's important is that if the owner decides that they want to do this, then full drawings need to be resubmitted to Historic Zoning Commission for the staff to review. And this might well include having structural members that then get cut back to the existing depths when you have the eaves coming out of the house. Certainly it looks like probably 2x4 structures for the dormer and for the front porch. So there may have to be larger structural members inside and then transition, because I think the width and the depth of all the exterior fascia needs to be the same as it is today.
In terms of that documentation, that would be represented in a new application, that those details would be absolute, not, we think it was a 2x6 before. Certainly those kinds of things are reasons why projects come back to us.
Any others? Commission? Any more comments? Okay. Vice Chair, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion. Could we pull the recommendations back up? With respect to 1402 Ordway Place, I recommend approval of the proposed roof demolition and reconstruction with the condition that all drawings, including engineering drawings, detailing, be submitted to staff for approval prior to demolition, and that the other conditions, 1 and 2, be retained as part of this motion.
Okay, there's a motion by Vice Chair Stewart.
Just for the record, also, I'll second, for the record, the applicant's description of the amount of damage certainly would, I just want to make sure it is on the record, but that's documented here.
Oh, and the other part of that motion ought to be Joseph's conditions that he previously stated.
Okay.
So second as amended motion.
Second as amended motion. All right.
I can
please
reread
do.
them if you'd like me to. Number 1, the historic chimney be retained. Number 2, the existing dormers be reconstructed as is. The dimensions, form, and pitch of the reconstructed roof match those of the existing roof. Number 4, a partial demo and shoring plan be reviewed and approved prior to permitting. And number 5, partial demolition be accomplished manually and not begin until a partial demo and shoring plan has been approved and the building has been shored.
Okay,
So for clarity, there are a total of 7 conditions.
very good. All right. There's been a motion by Vice Chair Stewart. There's a second by Commissioner Mosley. Is there any other discussion before we make the vote? Okay. All in favor of the motion? Okay. Any opposed? Hearing, seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you, applicant. Please continue to work with staff. I appreciate your presentation. Don't be nervous next time. I don't think he heard me. Don't be nervous next time.
The next case is 131 44th Avenue North. 131 44th Avenue is a circa 1940 minimal traditional house that does not contribute to the historic character of the Bowling House Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. The lot was created from from the back of 4400 Nebraska Avenue's lot in the late 1940s, and it is only 3,500 square feet. The applicant proposes a one-story porch addition that does not meet the 20-foot rear setback. It will be 12 feet from the rear property line. Staff finds the proposed rear setback to be appropriate in this instance for several reasons. First, the lot is unusually shallow at only 70 feet deep. This is less than 1/2 the depth of a typical lot in the Bowling House Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. Also, the addition is modestly scaled. It's one story. It's a screen porch addition that is just 255 square feet. And the commission has approved similar additions and setbacks when the lots have been shallow, such as this one. I'll go back to this. The addition does not meet the base zone, does meet the base zoning setbacks on the sides, just not on the rear there. This is the rear elevation, and this is the side elevations. Overall, staff finds that the addition's height, scale, materials, setbacks, roof form, and fenestration pattern meet the design guidelines. And so staff recommends approval of the project with the condition that the MHCC approve the roof shingle color. And with that, we find that the project meets the design guidelines. You did receive public comment from a neighbor for this one, and that was included in the SharePoint. Happy to take questions as well.
Thank you, Joseph. Applicant?
Hi, my name is Katie Lamb. I lived at 4400 Nebraska, the house next door. It's 2,000 square feet and does have a screen porch, which I got a variance from y'all 25 years ago to build. So now I live in 131, which is 780 square feet, cozy, very cozy. And the addition of the screen porch, I believe, is going to exponentially increase the livability of that house, which is going to be my last house. So I hope that you approve it. The other thing is the lot line is to a vacant lot. There's been nothing done to that lot in 30 years that I've lived next door to it. So I don't think anything is going to be done to it. But regardless, I don't even think that the neighbor can see the screen porch for the trees on the empty lot. Anyway, I appreciate your time and concern.
Thank you for coming. Okay. Open public hearing. Identify yourself, please. Come to the podium.
I'm worse than the other guy.
No.
I've had a fear of cameras since the mid-'70s. I'm not kidding you. Okay, so while this is fresh on my mind, the house was listed as 840 square feet, living large with the realtor, Alan DeCooper. And it is spacious because I went to look at it. So let's see, I was going to say there seems to me plenty of room for a screened-in porch already on the back of the house without invading the setback line. So I've been living there for 32 years, and my kids and I know every square inch of this parcel. So this vacant thing, I don't know, we've been living on it all this time. Just because that's the case doesn't mean it's not buildable. So that's a choice, and thus far. And I guess if you can, right there where it says deck on this diagram, it appears that it could go over towards the end of the house, and that's 8 by 8 for the deck. So 16 or more. And my son grew up in a porch that's 8 feet wide, so I know how spacious that is. We joke about this, kind of a joke. It is true. He did grow up on the porch, but his bedroom is 8 feet wide. And my front porch is 6.5 feet deep. So there's a lot of space for a screened-in porch without coming towards 4402 Nebraska Avenue, which I own, and I own 4404 Nebraska Avenue. And the reason I'm upset is I just can't believe I have to be doing this because I'm sleep deprived and all kinds of things. But it's just very strange that it wasn't thought of beforehand. When I met with Alan or, you know, in passing, it sounded like it was a done deal.
Right.
So-
Your time is.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you,
'cause I was
Mr.
gonna
Priest.
Finish anyway.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you for being here. You know, you were here early. Anyone else from public hearing? Okay. Just want to make sure those that are still here have a voice. Okay. Okay, thank you. Close public hearing. Did the applicant have some minutes for any rebuttal? Yeah. Yeah. If you wanted to say anything, you can from the public hearing. Okay. Just wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to do that. All right. Thank you.
I'll start. Modest house, modest request. Just in terms of the logistics of these, I don't want to say we don't see these very often. They're not common, but we do see in this condition where you've got a house that is, a lot's been carved off and you've got a kind of a mid-block house that addresses a street that's not the long skinny lots that are traditional in most neighborhoods, certainly most historic neighborhoods. So I bring that up in that in the lot that is planned south or page to the bottom, although it's not completely shown here, a side setback would be adjacent to the next lot, and this would be compliant. Now, you know, there has to be a rear setback applied at, I say has to. Certainly, you know, I wanted to point that out and that the request here would not be terribly different, given that there's a shed already. Granted, it's less than 100, appears to be less than 100 square feet, so it can violate the base zoning setbacks. But if we were to see the complete house that's facing Nebraska, that side setback would be something that would be different, and it wouldn't be 20. And so in terms of light and air to the adjacent lot, vacant or not, there could be something built there. This doesn't seem like, if we were to approve this application as submitted, this doesn't seem to be an egregious overstep in terms of what setbacks could be applied if this lot had not previously been carved out. Just my 2 cents worth.
You know, I tend to agree. It's not unusual for us to see much smaller setbacks than the 12 feet they're requesting. And it'd be impossible, I think, it appears to be very difficult to do a 20-foot setback on this and have anything that's usable. So I think the staff recommendation is appropriate for this. And with respect to 131 44th Avenue North, I move for approval with staff conditions.
Okay, Vice Chair Stewart has made a motion, and is there a second? Did I hear you? Oh, okay. Commissioner Smith has made a second. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Seeing or hearing none opposed, that motion passes. Okay, thank you very much.
The applicant for the Elliston Place Rock Block is here. If you'd like to hear more, I know you've already made your decision, but if you wanted to hear more about the greater project.
Yeah, procedurally, you'd like to suspend the rules
Okay.
again and invite him to come up and.
We are
and
now
offer comment.
suspending the rules we need to make a
An
motion to
motion,
suspend the
yes.
rules.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Vice Chair and Commissioner Mosley and Vice Chair Stewart has made the motion. All in favor? I would know none is opposed. Okay.
Good afternoon, and I apologize. I mistakenly went to the Board of Ed, just assuming that because of the election that this would be me being just one step too clever for my own good. Thank you also for giving me an opportunity to present just a little bit. We're very excited about the overlay. We greatly appreciate Robin and staff's help with this. As a person who was born and raised in Nashville, I spent a lot of time on the rock block, much more time than my parents realized. From my...
Tell us those stories.
Nope, no. I told Robin I'm not telling the stories of the Robin. I got a few really good ones that I can share, having heard bands that were just absolutely unbelievable at some of these places. Saw Greg Allman one time just walk in and sit down and start playing the guitar. But it's only a Nashville kind of moment. So we're doing actually quite a bit of work here. I represent Tony Giarratana and some of his partners and some of the projects that have gone on in this area. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the soda shop and the work that's been done there. And it is a vibrant restaurant now that has a lot of business and is drawing a lot of people to that area. As former planning director, I will tell you also that the Midtown study that was done 15 years ago at least, contemplated that at 22nd and Church Street and Elston Place, that there would be some open space. There's an odd little triangle just directly across the street from this historic overlay that we're asking for. And with another development that we're looking at just directly across the street from this, we're working with NDOT to offer that open space to the community and create it as a pedestrian respite area, and hopefully put some bike racks in there and make a greater connection with the bike lanes down to Centennial Park for this area. The idea is both with the historic preservation and the other development that we are trying to move forward on in this area is to make it a pedestrian village. In Nashville, we have lots of villages all around our city, all around the county. This is one that hasn't been as well preserved and activated as many of the others have. But that's exactly what we're trying to do, both with this overlay and with the other development in the area, is to have it heavily focused towards pedestrians. There are a couple of things in the guidelines that I just wanted to make sure. I believe that the guidelines as written contemplates everything that we're attempting to do in this area. And I really appreciate Robin and the staff working to make that so. A couple of little quirks in that are, we're going to work with NDOT for some, what they call the Parklet program, to create some cafe space in front of these. There's a whole process that we go through with NDOT to make that happen. And I don't think that the regs prevent us from doing that. It does talk about not blocking the sidewalks. But I believe, and it does also reference that we should talk to NDOT. And I believe as long as we work with NDOT and we're clear that to leave a path for pedestrian movement along the front of this, then we should be fine. But I wanted to highlight that. That is an intention that we have. On 2209, which is D, you see in front of you is D, is one of the units. There was historically an open space that went all the way to behind these buildings. So over 45 feet back in between or on either side of D. I recall the one that's shown furthest to the left and is further south if you're on Elston Place, as a way that you could get back there. And that was open for many years and then it got blocked off. But there was also another one just on the north side of D. And as they got in there and they looked at it, they realized that wasn't really a part of either building, that it was a void that historically had been there. And so they're putting that back in and having it so that when you're walking along Elston Place and you encounter that opening, it goes about 25 feet back. And then there is a foyer area that leads into what will be the rock block lofts behind these buildings. And so again, I read through the design guidelines and I don't read it to say that you can't do that or that that's not appropriate. But I felt like at least mentioning it during this hearing so that for the future, maybe not all of us will be here when this issue comes up, but that we talked about it and that it was contemplated. These little quirks that aren't normally found in our historic areas.
I think they call it a paseo these days.
Paseo, that is the new term. Yes, it is. Thank you. Commissioner Mosley?
Just for the record.
Yeah, that's a paseo. It was a word that I've become familiar with in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and it's used quite a bit now. That and I'm trying to remember the other term that I get a lot now. But that is what that would be. It's a paseo. Now, the one on the far south actually is where we're going to consolidate trash pickup. We think, again, a lot of times our historic buildings, and I know that this community, this board is well familiar with the problems that we have with First Avenue and how are we ever going to turn First Avenue into something that's more active and that's not just a back of house for Second Avenue. And the struggle that our community has had with that forever has been about the trash pickup in those historic buildings. And so for these buildings, they will bring their trash down to that alleyway, if you will. It'll be closed. It'll be only open to the property owners, but that's where they'll bring their trash for a consolidated trash pickup. And we think that that's a pretty elegant solution to this problem for this area, that we already had this space available. Porosity, that was the other word. Lots of porosity downtown. Do you have any questions? Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak.
What kind of retail are you proposing to go into the buildings?
Restaurants, I think there's a deli. One's a deli, B is a deli, I think, and the other two are restaurants and bars. Traditional rock block types of venues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gold
I
Rush?
understand that the bean burrito will be part of the menu on C, which historically was something Gold Rush always had. A late night fare. Was back then.
So you weren't here when we made the comments earlier, but a number of us have history on this block and stories to tell, and which we won't do today.
And not to tell, right?
Not to tell. That's right. But we're glad to see this piece of our history preserved, brought back to life, and to see this place once again become vibrant and a part of the neighborhoods.
During the Midtown, there was Midtown rezoning, I want to say maybe 2010 to 2012, something like that. And this area came under scrutiny. And I will tell you that your department was very vocal about not allowing additional entitlements in this area to try and keep it preserved till a time when it was valued enough to be saved. And I think we've gotten there. I think we've gotten there with these buildings. Best of luck with the Lee building. I lived in that building just behind Gold Rush, which made my stumble very short getting home.
And also to commend the owner to really have initiative to do this, get ahead of it and have some input in the design guidelines as well. So.
Well, and Tony and I walked with Robin up and down Elliston just the other day, making sure that we were all in sync with what we wanted to get done. And I will tell you that he's great to work with because he really is wanting to do it the right way. And I think he's shown that with the soda shop as well.
So good. Yep.
Okay.
This is a whole different project for you to present versus anything that's adverse.
I realize that not everything that I've been able to bring forward is always well received, but I felt like this would be.
We appreciate it.
So I definitely wanted the FaceTime of something good, right?
Yeah, very good. Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, and please tell the property owners that, bravo.
I will.
Yeah.
Also tell them we're looking forward to the bean roll.
Yeah, the bean roll at the Gold Rush.
I'll make sure you know.
Are they going to name it like GR2 or something? Let's
on the list.
lean to, like a lean to Gold Rush or something?
Yeah, that and you'll notice that the billiard tables, they made sure that they kept room for the billiard tables, but I think historically there was one downstairs and one upstairs. But I think they'll both be downstairs
Cool.
now,
Cool.
as I recall.
Thanks, Mr. Sloan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Legal, do we have to do anything on procedure again?
Yes, well, you can go back and you can close the session where you suspended the rules and return to the regular agenda.
All right, we're going to close, suspend, tell me again, I always forget suspend the rules.
You can read-
We're going to close the suspend the rules per se, okay? Yeah, could you just help me out there? Go ahead, Commissioner Mosley. Yeah, okay. Are you making the motion to, let's close from suspending the rules? Yes. All right, there you go. Commissioner Cotton, Commissioner Mayhall, all in favor? None opposed for sure. All right, thank you.
Now, if you'd like, you don't have to, but you can close the meeting and we can talk about Secretary of Interior standards, or you can keep it open either way.
I think let's just close the meeting. That way IT no longer has to record us.
Around.
Okay, thank you. We have moved to adjourn. Thank you, IT. Thanks, staff. If you want to hang out. Yeah, hanging out.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.